what of course was when the PlayStation 4 Pro was announced, it was like, okay, are they now going to show all the games on the PlayStation 4 Pro? Is this now the when our original PlayStation people are going to get screwed over? And of course, there are some things that, for example, the Battlefield multiplayer, it's running on a better frame rate, so you might have an advantage there. Um, and there are some other things, and of course, right now the games were made for PS4, then upscaled to PS4 Pro, so we don't really we will not see it right now if original PlayStation owners will really like get the worst version. But it was interesting for me that during the PlayStation experience, it was not all all the games we saw were running on PS4. There was never this like line in the screen with like enhanced for PS4 Pro that you were looking at PS4 Pro gameplay. With Uncharted, with the Last of Us trailer even, they were all running on PS4. And I really think that this is what Sony like communicated with. This is just a cool 4K device. If you want it, go ahead. But we are still aiming for the PS4, and the Pro versions will just get upscaled. Will just get a better frame rate if that's possible. So I really like this trend that they were not like, we now have this better console, let's just make all our games look as good as we can. They were just still like, yeah, good to people, like saying, okay, wow, this is and of course it's like hard to say a little bit with the PlayStation experience because Uncharted 4 is a game made for the PS4. But with the Last of Us trailer, yeah, that was of course a cinematic trailer. I mean, if we see God of War for the second time and it's running on PS4 Pro, then it might be different. But right now, I think that I'm pretty happy with how Sony is treating the PlayStation 4 Pro.
I honestly, I see them doing this only to sort of make it so people who own the PlayStation 4 don't feel like they're being left behind. And
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that the reason why they call it the PlayStation 4 Pro instead of the PlayStation 5 isn't because the technology wasn't a big leap, because it was 2 times the performance, but they also knew that by calling it just the PlayStation 4 Pro, it wouldn't also make people who own the PlayStation 4, which is millions of people, it wouldn't make them feel like they've been left behind. And I think this is just more evidence towards that. But I don't think that this is the beginning of the end in terms of like, oh, well, they're obviously going to keep making PlayStation 4 things meant for the PlayStation 4 and they're not going to leave it behind. I think this is only sort of a means to the end in terms of once the Pro builds up a big enough install base, they'll start to sort of leave the PlayStation 4 behind more and more and make people buy the Pro just so developers don't have to develop for essentially two different devices, or even 3 if you think about the fact that a lot of these Pro games have a 1080p more enhanced and a 4K version, right? Or dynamic 4K is what they're calling it because it's not really 4K. But yeah, I think that this is a good start for them. I think that for their current install base, it will ease them into it a lot more. And but I think that in the end they're just doing this because they don't want to piss anyone off and they want to coax them into buying a Pro until the point where they're like, okay, we have enough where now we can force these people to buy the Pro because we have the install base to do that.
But do you really think that what I think that Sony will totally do is that they now have this Pro, they will just do this for until the PlayStation 5, so they have just the PS4 and the PS4 Pro alongside till the PlayStation 5, and then it will just reset again. I think that will happen, and not that they will then move to the PS4 Pro, then have the PS4 Pro and the PS5, and then move from the PS4 Pro to the PS5. Stuff like that. I don't think that will happen. I think that PS4 Pro will always be this console that, get a better performance, but it will not change the way you play the game, because otherwise the PS4 Pro would also have a better UI, and they would have stuck way more time into that, while right now it's just a console, just a box with some better tech in it, and yeah, that's about it.
No, I think it really just comes down to Sony wanting to release consoles more frequently, and what we saw with this is the Pro, where it wasn't as like the most polished thing to release from them. It was more of like sort of an in-between prototype. if you will, of what they were sort of working on. Like, let's just go ahead and release it. It's streamlined enough. We think we could sell it, and they ended up selling it to not only people but also developers as well. Not that developers aren't people, but you know what I mean. And so it really comes down to the fact that they're trying to amplify how many consoles are releasing, because they don't want to just wait 5 to 10 years to release another console. They want it to be every like 3 years, every 3 to 5 years, and sort of bring that down to be even shorter, so that way they're making a little bit of money profit wise off the hardware, but they're also and the reason why I say that they're not gonna, and we've talked about this before about the Pro, I think that it will go the PlayStation 4 PlayStation 4 Pro, and then once the PlayStation 5 comes out, it'll be the PlayStation 4 Pro, and then PlayStation 5, and then PlayStation 5 Pro, and then PlayStation 5, and then so on and so forth. And I think the reason why they're going to do that, just like what Microsoft's been touting, they're going to be trying to do a unified ecosystem so no one's left behind. And that's going to basically mean that no one's left behind until we release like 3 consoles, and then you're going to, chop the last one off and then continue on, because these developers have the assets that they're going to have to develop anyhow. And it's just like with the PC. I mean, you can go down to like super potato resolutions, like 800 by 600 with super low textures and everything. So they can always still develop for the lower console. It just becomes harder when it's super old. So like when the PlayStation 5 comes out and they have the PlayStation 4 Pro as well, they're not going to want to go back to the PlayStation 4, but they wouldn't really mind going back to the PlayStation 4 Pro because it already has an install base and it has the hardware to sort of back up enough of what they want to do, where they're not going to develop for it maybe, but they're going to have an alternative version for it so people don't get fully left behind.
Okay. Yeah, I know that with Scorpio, Microsoft just wants it to be a PC so that the Xbox One will probably be the low settings and the Scorpio be the high settings.
Yeah.
Something like that. But I don't see the PlayStation 4 Pro doing that. I hope I'm right and you're wrong. But because I think that with the PlayStation 4, Sony saw such a great success, so why change a lot about it, right? Why change the way consoles work while they still have this huge success? I mean, they can release a PlayStation 5 Pro 2 years after the PS4, or 3 years even, and I'm fine with that. But yeah, to not like do this real reset, to not make it feel like you're really making this huge leap with a new UI, because you can have the PS4 UI and the PS5 UI. Maybe the PS4 will have an update, of course, but there will probably be new features inside the PS5 that the PS4 Pro simply cannot do, while the PS4 to the PS4 Pro it's simply not the case.
Of course,
if you don't count like resolution. But
and I'm not saying that the PlayStation 5 won't be different. I'm saying that it will be different. It's just that they don't want, with the faster releases of consoles, they don't want people to feel ripped off. And if you release a PlayStation 5 2 to 3 years after the PlayStation 4 Pro and you expect those people to buy it, they're going to feel ripped off. And so I think that's why they're going to ease it in and sort of make it the same as the PlayStation 4, because they understand the console market enough to where console gamers expect to keep the same hardware for a while. And just releasing the Pro made some people feel a little bit of anger towards Sony, but it wasn't enough for them to totally drop the brand. So with this one, sort of the first sort of smack, it hurts. But then after that, once you sort of get punches, like with an MMA, for example, or boxing, the first punch or whatever you take, it's going to hurt. But the more you take punches, the more you understand, okay, well, the pain tolerance isn't there. And so it's the same with consumers. They'll realize, okay, well, this is sort of what they're going to be doing, and this is what I should expect. Okay, so they're not gonna leave me behind, but maybe with the next one they will. But by then it'll be a long enough period where I should just invest in another console anyhow. And if I need to, I'll buy the lower end. And if I want to, I'll buy the higher end and call it good.
Yeah, okay.
So it makes sense from their sort of standpoint of not leaving people behind, not pissing them off, and making them feel like they've been ripped off. And that's why I think they'll do it. But yeah, the PS5 I think is definitely going to be a big improvement in terms of the interface and the features and stuff like that. But I think that I just believe that they're going to definitely support the Pro still, but probably not the OG console.
Yeah. Okay. I will be interesting to see that, of course. I think it's really hard to make these kinds of predictions right now when Sony just released one better iteration. If they are like okay, next year we will have a new one, or in 2 years we will have
PlayStation
another
Pro
one.
Plus.
Yeah, exactly. Then okay, then I can see your point. But right now, I really see them just, okay, they're testing the water. That's obviously true. But I think that they will also stick to this normal console generation because it's doing very well for them.
Or if,
But
if they go with the Apple titles, the new PlayStation 4 Pro.
Pro. Oh man, I hope they don't do that. I hope that the next PlayStation will look better though, because wow, man,
Yes, I agree.